The night the Hem tour was not loud or dramatic, but it carried the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you aware of every breath you take. The city lights of Chicago shimmered beyond the glass walls of the executive floor, and somewhere between the echo of closing elevators and the soft hum of fluorescent lights, a moment arrived that would quietly change two lives forever. It began with a small accident, a torn skirt, and the kind of dignity that trembles when pride and vulnerability collide. Before the story unfolds any further, pause for a second. If you believe in kindness when no one is watching, in second chances that come disguised as inconveniences, and in people choosing respect over impulse, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this exist because people still believe goodness matters. She was a woman used to control. Margaret Collins had built her name in steel and glass, rising from an intern with borrowed heels to the youngest female CEO the firm had ever appointed. Boardrooms bent to her clarity, markets responded to her decisiveness, and headlines followed her with reverence and quiet resentment. Yet that evening, after a charity gala hosted by her company in downtown Chicago, control slipped away in the smallest, cruelest way. As she stepped from the car and climbed the marble stairs back into the office to retrieve forgotten documents, the sharp sound of fabric tearing cut through her composure. It was nothing anyone else noticed, but she felt it instantly, like a crack in armor. Inside the empty office, she stood alone, hands braced against her desk, heart racing not from fear of scandal but from something deeper. The tear was along the side seam, subtle yet unmistakable, exposing more than she would ever allow the world to see. In a life where mistakes were measured in millions, this felt absurdly personal. She considered calling her driver back, considered leaving the documents behind, considered pretending it never happened. But the truth was simple and stubborn. She needed help, and help required trust. That trust arrived in the form of Andrew Walker, the late-night facilities coordinator who cleaned offices, fixed lights, and stitched small problems back together when everyone else had gone home. Andrew was not invisible, though the world treated him that way. He had once dreamed of becoming an engineer, had once believed effort guaranteed reward, but life had detoured him through hospital bills, a broken family, and the quiet acceptance of survival work. Still, he carried himself with gentleness, the kind born from disappointment endured without bitterness. Margaret had noticed him before, though she could not have said when. Perhaps it was the way he always nodded respectfully without expectation, or the way he treated her office, like a place of purpose rather than power. When she found him that night, she felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. The situation was painfully awkward, and yet, in the stillness of that empty floor, it became something else entirely. There were no raised voices, no flustered explanations, just two people standing at the edge of an unplanned moment that demanded integrity. What followed was not scandal, not temptation, but restraint. Andrew turned away as requested, his back a quiet wall of respect, explaining calmly what needed to be done to keep the tear from worsening. His hands, when they worked, did so with clinical care, like a tailor repairing dignity stitch by stitch, rather than fabric alone. Margaret, standing there under the fluorescent lights, felt tears sting her eyes, not from embarrassment, but from the overwhelming relief of being treated as human rather than spectacle. In that moment, the power dynamics she had navigated her entire career dissolved. She was no longer the CEO, and he was no longer the man who emptied her trash. They were simply two people sharing a fragile truth about vulnerability. Margaret realized how rarely she allowed herself to be seen without armor, how exhausting it had been to carry perfection like a shield. Andrew, meanwhile, felt something he had not allowed himself in years, usefulness that mattered. After that night, nothing changed immediately, and yet everything did. The skirt was repaired, the documents retrieved, and they parted without ceremony. But Margaret found herself noticing Andrew more, asking his name, thanking him with sincerity that surprised them both. Andrew found himself walking a little taller, reminded that decency still had value even when unseen. Their paths crossed in small ways, shared elevators, exchanged smiles, but the memory of that night lingered like a quiet promise. The challenges they faced were not dramatic but deeply human. Margaret struggled with loneliness at the top, with the suspicion that admiration often disguised resentment. Andrew wrestled with invisibility, with the fear that his best years had slipped away unnoticed. Yet each carried the seed of change planted by a moment of mutual respect. Margaret began mentoring young women with renewed empathy, no longer preaching invincibility but resilience. Andrew enrolled in night classes, encouraged by the reminder that his hands and mind still mattered. As weeks turned into months, the company itself seemed to soften at the edges. Small policies changed, names were remembered, people felt seen. Margaret understood now that leadership was not about standing above others but standing steady when someone needed you to look away, to honor their dignity without question. Andrew learned that self-worth could be reclaimed not through recognition, but through integrity practiced in silence. Just before the end of this story, take a moment to comment below and share what this moment meant to you. Your words matter more than you think. The final encounter came quietly, as meaningful. Things often do. Margaret passed Andrew in the lobby one morning, both carrying coffee, both smiling with the ease of shared understanding. No words were exchanged, none were needed. The torn skirt had long been forgotten, but the lesson it carried remained stitched into their lives. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can exist even in the most awkward moments, please like, share, and engage with this video. Your support keeps stories like this alive, stories that remind us that dignity is not given by titles or taken by circumstance, but preserved by the choices we make when no one else is looking.